Taking you live to the White House now, where we are about to hear from US President Donald Trump speaking after talks to try and break the deadlock over the shutdown. Let's listen in.
It's ranged from 160 to 180,000, and this really took people by surprise. This is a great number. I think it has a lot to do with the factories and with the companies that are moving back into the United States who have left, and now they're coming back to us instead of being in other countries. I can't tell you what that does to other countries, but I'm the president of this country. So 312,000 jobs was a tremendous number, and obviously having a big impact on the stock market today. And I do want people to remember that we've had a tremendous success, despite the fact that I'm in the midst of negotiating incredible trade deals for our country that should have been negotiated many years ago. By both parties, to be honest. But many years ago, we are doing very well in our negotiation with China. We pretty much concluded our negotiation with Canada, with Mexico. We have done the deal and signed the deal with South Korea, which a lot of people said was not going to happen, would be impossible. It's a good deal. It was a horrible deal. It's a good deal. I think a lot of this has to do with the fact, though, that already companies are moving back into our country that have left our country in some cases. In some cases, they're moving back because they want to be here. But in many cases, these are automobile companies that have left and gone to other countries, and now they're coming back to the United States. So it's nice to see. One of the things that's so beautiful to watch is 3.2% wage growth. That hasn't happened in so long for our country. That's an incredible thing. That means people are actually getting more money, taking home more money, and that's something that's really nice to see. A lot of you have been following me when we were on a thing called a campaign. That was an exciting campaign, a great campaign. And I used to talk about wages going down, not going up, but going down for years, 19 years. And now they just went up 3.2%, and yet there's no inflation because other things are going down, like the price of your gasoline at the tank. It's low, and that doesn't happen by luck. I work hard on that. That's like a tax cut for people. So a lot of good things are happening. Labor participation rate increased to 63.1. That's an incredible number also. So I just wanted to bring that out. The economy is very good. And remember, from the time of my election, the stock market's gone up very close to 30%. And that's with all of the things that are happening. And there are a lot of things happening. We have a massive trade negotiation going on with China. President Xi is very much involved. So am I. We're dealing at the highest levels, and we're doing very well. We're doing very well. In the meantime, we've taken in billions and billions of dollars in tariffs from China and from others. Our steel industry's come roaring back, and that makes me very happy. I think we'll have to build a steel wall as opposed to a concrete wall, because we have steel companies again. There's something awfully nice about that sound. So we had a productive meeting today with Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer. I thought it was really a very, very good meeting. We're all on the same path in terms of wanting to get government open. We're going to be meeting. I've designated a group, and we're going to be meeting over the weekend, that group, to determine what we're going to do about the border. Really, I want to thank a lot of the Border Patrol people and ICE people who came up yesterday. They had a tremendous impact on, I think, a lot of Democrats, frankly, but a lot of people, because they were able to lay out exactly what the problem is. And one of the problems described to me as an example, your ports of entry. We're going to agree with Chuck and Nancy and Steny and Dick Durbin was there. We're going to agree that, and we want to, make the ports bigger, more powerful, able to handle more traffic, have very, very powerful drug equipment there. So they make very good stuff now. We don't have it because of budgets and other reasons, but we're going to make our ports of entry very powerful, very strong. We're going to have the best drug-finding equipment anywhere in the world. They make it much better today than they made it even 2 years ago. And I explained to him the problem is, though, we can have a wonderful port of entry, but you have 2,000 miles of border between the United States and Mexico. And if you take a look and you see, like we do, through certain technology, including cameras in airplanes, not just drones, you'll see vast numbers of vehicles driving through the desert and entering where you don't have a very powerful fence or a wall. That happened this week, where a wonderful young police officer, I spoke to his wife yesterday, where he was shot, viciously shot, for simply stopping a person that came over the border illegally. Got shot, killed, and took the most beautiful picture just hours before, a Christmas picture. We don't want that happening. But I was explained to, and I explained to people, because it's really common sense. So you have ports of entry, and we have great security at the ports of entry. And then you may have fencing or walls up and down, left and right, east and west, but they stop because we don't have proper border security. These people have vehicles, and they drive to the right. They're not going through where we have great Border Patrol officers and ICE officers and military now. I tell you, the military has done a fantastic job. They don't stop. They go right to the easiest part and the weakest part, sometimes out in desert, but you have miles and miles and miles of unprotected area, and you can see where they drive over. You even have people walking that trek, and that's a very dangerous trek. And they bring children, or even worse, they use children. You know, children are the biggest beneficiaries of what we want to do. Children are hurt more than anybody else. These coyotes, what they do with children, all because we have open borders, because they think they can get away with it. They don't come in through the port where we have a lot of protection. They come in through empty areas, vast spaces, empty areas. Just like this terrible person came in when he shot Officer Singh. They come in through these vast open areas. You don't even have a sign saying Mexico, U.S. There's no sign designating you have just entered the United States, just open space. And I explained that to the meeting today with Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and a lot of other people at the meeting. And I said, one of the things that happens there is human traffickers. Maybe that's the worst of all, where you'll have traffickers having 3 and 4 women with tape on their mouths and tied up, sitting in the back of a van or a car, and they'll drive that van or the car not through a port of entry where we have very talented people that look for every little morsel of drugs or even people or whatever they're looking for. Not going to go there. They get off the road, and they drive out into the desert, and they come on, they make a left turn. Usually it's a left, not a right. Most of them come out because in San Diego and in areas of California, we just finished brand new walls, beautiful walls, steel walls. And they wanted them badly. They were asking us. That's why we did it there. I said, let's not do it in California. California always complains through their great governors. They're always complaining. I said, let's not do it. Let the governor ask us. But we did it anyway because they really needed it. They were having tremendous problems. So we built a brand new wall in San Diego, and it's working really well. You should go and look at it. It's amazing. It's incredible how well it works. But these coyotes and these human traffickers, they make a right turn before they get to the port of entry. They go as far as the wall is or as far as the barricade is, and then they make a left. Welcome to the United States. And what they do with usually the women, sometimes children, that they're trafficking with and in, you don't want to know about. So the only way you're going to stop that is by having a solid steel structure or concrete structure, whether it's a wall or some form of very powerful steel. Now, the steel is actually more expensive than the concrete, but I think we're probably talking about steel because I really feel the other side feels better about it. And I can understand what they're saying. It is more expensive. We mentioned the price that we want $5.6 billion very strongly, because numbers are thrown around, 1.6, 2.1, 2.5. This is national security we're talking about. We're not talking about games. We're talking about national security. This should have been done by all of the presidents that preceded me, and they all know it. Some of them have told me that we should have done it. So we're not playing games. We have to do it. And just remember human traffickers. Remember drugs. The drugs are pouring into this country. They don't go through the ports of entry. When they do, they sometimes get caught. When we finish, and the Democrats do want this, they want ports of entry strengthened, and I want to do that too. In fact, we have it down. It's about $400 million, and we can have the best equipment in the world. Now what they'll do, if we have the protection and we have strong ports of entry with this incredible drug-finding equipment, I don't know what they're going to do, because they're not coming in through past the steel gates or the steel walls or the concrete walls, depending on what's happening, because we are meeting this weekend. We have a group. I've set up a group. They are going to tell us who their group of experts and probably people in the Senate and congressmen and women are going to come. And we have 3. I said, give us 3. Then I said, you know what? Send over 9 or 6 or 3 or 2. Doesn't matter. Send over whoever you want. But it's common sense. So now when they make that turn, they make it, and now all of a sudden they can't go any further. And they have to go back. And that's going to stop the caravans for 2 reasons. Number one, they're not going to be able to get through. But when they realize they can't get through, what's going to happen? They're not going to form, and they're not going to try and come up. And they can apply for asylum, and they can, most importantly, they can apply for citizenship, because the companies that I told you that created these great job numbers, they're incredible job numbers, beyond anybody's expectations. I don't think there was one Wall Street genius, of which I know many of them, but they're not geniuses. There's not one that predicted anywhere close to these job numbers. I thought they were going to be good, but there wasn't one that I saw. So now we have everything so beautifully handled. We need to have, however, we need border security. And all of this security, if we do what I think what the Democrats want, all of the border things that we'll be building will be done right here in the good old USA by steel companies that were practically out of business when I came into office as president, and now they're thriving. You call up the heads of U.S. Steel, and I could name 10 companies. You look at what's going on in the steel industry. It's almost a miracle. It was a dead industry. We need steel for defense. We need steel for a lot of things, steel and aluminum. But those industries were in deep trouble. The steel industry was almost dead, and now it's a very vibrant, vibrant industry. So what I'm going to do is ask, first of all, Mike Pence, Vice President, to say a couple of words, because Mike is, we put together a team of people that will work over the weekend, and they'll be negotiating on the border, on the look, on different things having to do with border security, including at the ports of entry. And I think they're going to be very successful, because I found the Democrats really want to do something. So we're at 5.6, if you look at it, $5.6 billion. But we are able to also, in addition to that, because what we want to do has to be done properly, and we're negotiating very tough prices, very, very tough, because you heard much higher numbers. Those higher numbers were very much a misnomer. You heard 20 and 25 billion in DACA. What happened is when a judge incredibly, because it was an incredibly, I will say, wrong decision. In fact, President Obama, when he signed the DACA with the executive order, made a statement to the effect, this isn't going to work. and some judge from the Ninth Circuit, here we go again, upheld it. And then it was upheld by the Ninth Circuit appellate, and now it's going before the United States Supreme Court, and hopefully that will be properly adjudicated, because if it is, talks will begin on larger immigration matters having to do with DACA, having to do with other things. So that is taking place. We may add a few things onto our discussions over the weekend, but I'm going to ask Mike Pence, and then I'll have Leader McCarthy say a few words, and we'll take a couple of questions. But we're very proud of the jobs and the job numbers. That was incredible. And I think I'll be even more proud if we can have great border security for the first time in really the history of our country. The southern border is a dangerous, horrible disaster. We've done a great job, but you can't really do the kind of job we have to do unless you have a major, powerful barrier, and that's what we're going to have. So first, we start with Mike Pence. Okay, Mike.
All right, so we've just been listening to President Trump speaking there at the White House, taking credit for a strong jobs report today. He was very keen to emphasize that, this after a fair bit of turbulence in global markets and fears of an economic downturn. So President Trump really playing up today's U.S. jobs report. But the problem is that he is still grappling with the Democrats, who are more powerful in Congress after their takeover of the House of Representatives. Trump saying today that a meeting he had with them was productive, but there appears to be no breakthrough. A battle of wills goes on, with the president refusing to sign off on any legislation that does not include funding for his border wall. Kimberly Halkett is in Washington, and she is across all of these developments. And so, Kimberly, we know how much President Trump cares about what the markets are doing. And after the losses in recent weeks, he was really keen to take credit for today's jobs report. But on the border wall, he reiterated his position. Does it look as though we are heading for a serious and lengthy shutdown?
It does, because what we have here are two very different characterizations of the same meeting. Prior to Donald Trump speaking, as we heard just moments ago, we heard from the top Democrat in the Senate, the top Democrat in the House of Representatives, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, respectively, and they characterized the meeting as being one where there is still ongoing discussion, but the priority now is not border security, but reopening the government, and then talking about border security. The president saying that this is certainly important, but border security is his main goal. In fact, Chuck Schumer saying that, in fact, during their meeting, the president said he was willing to keep the partial government shutdown, some 800,000 federal workers off the job indefinitely. The quote was months, if not years. So certainly the perspective's very different. Now, perhaps for those 800,000 federal workers who are wondering what's going to happen next or sitting without a paycheck, they may see a glimmer of hope in the fact that Donald Trump has announced that there seems to be some sort of working group that has been created with experts from both sides working over the weekend to try and come to some sort of agreement on border security, which is the main sticking point. So certainly that could offer some sort of hope. But in terms of the larger question, does it look like this is over quickly? The answer is no, because certainly there are very different characterizations of what was discussed in that meeting. That's not boding very well for a resolution.
Indeed, it isn't. We've heard President Trump there trying to put a positive spin on it, haven't we? But let's just get a sense of the divide, the gulf that remains between President Trump and leading Democrats. This is what we heard from Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer a bit earlier.
We told the president we needed the government open. He resisted. In fact, he said he'd keep the government closed for a very long period of time, months or even years. The discussion then, we discussed a bunch of issues. As the leader said, they were somewhat contentious. And we'll continue discussing, of course. But it's very hard to see how progress will be made unless they open up the government.
We really cannot resolve this until we open up government, and we made that very clear to the president. Services are being withheld from the American people. Paychecks are being withheld from people who serve the needs of the American people, and our border security will suffer if we do not resolve this issue. We are committed to keeping our borders safe. That has always been our principle, to honor the oath of office that we take to protect and defend our country and our Constitution. We can do that best when government is open. We've made that clear to the president.
Just hearing Kimberly there, Nancy Pelosi describing the effects of this government shutdown, with hundreds of thousands of people, many thousands of people, not being able to access their salaries and so on. And of course, we know the Democrats have always prided themselves on being the anti-shutdown party. Is their position sustainable then?
Well, it is for the short term. For the long term, with each day that the government remains shut down, this only compounds the pain for the ordinary American worker and the American voter. So both sides have a lot to lose with each passing day. Already, this is the fourth longest shutdown in U.S. history. In another week, it will start to take over in the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. I think it's important to note, and I was a little confused, other than sort of the obvious trying to recapture the narrative, why Donald Trump was talking about renegotiating trade deals at the start of this press conference when the issue is a partial government shutdown. I think what he was trying to say somewhat inartfully is, look at, when I came into the office, a lot of people didn't expect that I could accomplish a renegotiating of NAFTA, that I could overcome the challenge of the trade imbalance with China, that both sides for years have agreed on Capitol Hill is a problem. So he's pointing out, you don't have a lot of faith in me right now that I'm going to get this border wall, but look at what I already accomplished. Trying to provide a little bit of hope to those American workers that perhaps are without a job at the moment. The problems that Donald Trump outlined, nobody disagrees on. Certainly, yes, the southern border, and we should point out the northern border with Canada, very porous in some sections. Many people have taken advantage of that and have jumped the line, if you will, jumping ahead of those that are trying to immigrate to the United States legally. And there are some horror stories. I've covered them myself. There are women who are sexually assaulted. There are horrific stories of human trafficking that occur. Those, no one disputes that that's the problem. The dispute comes in how to solve it. Nancy Pelosi has been very clear. She says, look, there's going to be no wall that's not consistent with American values. There are other ways to do border security, whether it's drones, whether it's monitoring on the ground. Donald Trump is of the belief that there needs to be a firm structure. You heard him there now talking about using steel to help continue to create jobs, that this is the way he wants it constructed. So the issue is not really in dispute. The solution is, now we know we have this working group coming together over the weekend, but again, the two sides are very far apart. It's hard to see how this can be resolved in the short term, and that is bad for the ordinary American, and ultimately bad, in a sense, for both parties. If both parties are seen as taking ownership of this, it could hurt both sides politically. At the moment, it appears it could hurt Republicans more than Democrats, but these things can change back and forth depending on the day.
That's right. So the immediate plan right now is for each side to designate staff to have talks this weekend. And we can see some comments here from Senate, the leading Republican in the U.S. Senate, Mitch McConnell, saying we'll see if they can reach an agreement and punt it back to us for a final sign-off. He doesn't want to get too involved yet.
He doesn't want to get too involved because he doesn't want to waste time debating something the president is never going to sign. The way it works in the United States, for something to become law, it has to pass in both chambers, the Senate and the House. It doesn't matter what order, but then it has to be signed by the president. So what we saw late on Thursday evening when Democrats took control of the House was what Mitch McConnell has sort of referred to as a largely symbolic action, passing two pieces of legislation to attempt to reopen the government, but knowing as they passed this that Donald Trump had already said he would never sign it. So in some respects it was theater, in some respects it was an attempt to try and reopen the government. But the Mitch McConnell, the top Republican in the Senate, saying we're not going to even debate and vote on legislation we already know the president won't sign. If you want us to debate something, you need to pass something in the House of Representatives that we know the president will sign. We will then pass it. So there's a lot of back and forth politically, political football, if you will. Where it stands right now, though, is that it's going to have to come from Congress. Congress makes the laws. The president signs them into laws. Still, it appears that our congressional leaders here in the United States are very far apart in terms of trying to achieve that.
And we're actually just hearing some more from President Trump. He's taking some questions. Let's listen in.
Put them in a position where they have to justify anything to a lot of the people that they have to make happy. We want to save lives. We want children to be safe. The children are being decimated. And I'm not talking about necessarily children in our country. I'm talking about wonderful children that are coming up from other places, whether it's Honduras or Guatemala or El Salvador or Mexico or other places. And we have to take care of those children also. We can't let them die on the way up. What's happening to women on those caravans, you're not talking about it, but it's horrible what's happening. If they know it's not going to take place because they can't get through because we have a great border wall or fence or barrier, they're not going to come up and you're not going to have the problem. At the same time, they can apply to come into our country legally, like so many people have done. And we need people, Major. We have to have people because we have all these companies coming in. We need great people, but we want them to come in on a merit basis, and they have to come in on a merit basis. They can't come in the way they've been coming in for years. I get calls from the great tech companies, and they're saying, we don't allow people at the top of their class at the best schools in the country, we don't allow them to stay in our country. So they end up going back to China and Japan and so many other countries all over the world, and we don't keep them. They get educated at our finest schools, and then we don't allow them through a various set of circumstances to have any guarantees of staying.
So we've been listening there to President Trump in Washington. Spoke a little bit about the economy. We know that he watches the markets very closely, and it was a positive jobs report out of the United States today, and that's dispelling fears perhaps of an economic downturn in 2019. But really, the big story here is that his meeting with leading Democrats at the White House has failed to produce any solution, no agreement on reopening the government. Those are the top stories coming up next on Al Jazeera. It's the